Well, the Premier League returns on Friday with champions and treble winners Manchester City in action against newly promoted Burnley. In the background to the new season is the wealth and transfer dealings from Saudi Arabia, though, which has seen the likes of Liverpool captain Jordan Henderson and Wolves' Ruben Neves heading to the Gulf state. The Premier League's chief executive, Richard Masters, told us they are monitoring the situation, but he isn't worried that more big names could be tempted to head there in the future.
We've seen an explosion of expenditure, I think, ahead of revenue. The Premier League is a £6 billion ecosystem economy that invests all of that back into the running of the competition on the pitch and off the pitch. And it's taken us 30 years, standing on the shoulders of 150 years of league football, to get to that position, to have that market share, if you like, to have that interest all around the world. It's a really long road that the Saudi Pro League has got to go on. Obviously, they've taken the view they would like to become a top 10 league by 2030. We know they're interested in hosting the World Cup in 2030. That decision hasn't been made yet. And they're investing in players and managers at the moment. But it needs a lot more than that. English football has history and tradition. It has packed stadia. 98.7% of our tickets were sold last year. It has home and away support. All those things, has a brilliant youth development system. So all those things go towards making a league successful. And it's not easy, and it's very competitive.
Is there a danger, though, that we could see a talent drain? I mean, we're already seeing a talent drain, aren't we? Some of the world's best players are now playing in Saudi Arabia.
It's about 450 million euros has been spent, according to our data set, on 20 players, under half of which have come from Premier League clubs. We know their window stays open a bit longer. We're not sure how much money is going to be spent. It's something we need to keep an eye on, obviously. But Saudi Arabian clubs are entitled to purchase like anyone else.
For more on this, we can cross to our senior reporter, Rob Dorset now. Afternoon, Rob. So much excitement ahead of the new campaign, but you asked Richard Masters about the cases against Manchester City and Everton. What did he have to say?
Yeah, you're right. It's an interesting day with the Premier League launch, you have to say, because amongst all of the obvious excitement connected with the start of the new season, that's why they chose Brighton and Hove Albion. They finished sixth last season, an extraordinary, historic season for them. That's why they decided to hold the launch here. As well as all of that, we have some pretty significant questions we have to ask Richard Masters, the Chief Executive of the Premier League, about big news stories. And there are not many bigger than the financial charges that the Premier League brought against Manchester City and against Everton, and he didn't want to go into too much detail about either of those, but he did understand that in some people's eyes, maybe those 115 charges against Manchester City, which the Premier League brought against them in February, and there is still no obvious resolution to those, that in some people's eyes that maybe has tarnished the fact that they've won 5 of the last 6 Premier League titles. But he said it's out of the Premier League's hands now. There are both cases against Manchester City and against Everton in the hands of an independent tribunal, and it's for them to dictate the timescale. So it's not in the Premier League's control right now. We start a new season with those 2 issues yet to be resolved for both those clubs.
Rob, City have won the Premier League 5 of the last 6 years. Would you say their dominance is a concern?
Not according to Richard Masters, no. And look, it's understandable, isn't it? Arsenal ran Manchester City so very close last season. They were leading the table for 248 days straight. So I don't think to suggest that Manchester City ran away with it last season, I don't think that would be accurate. And that's the point that the Premier League chief executive makes. The Premier League prides itself on the level of competition throughout the division, both in the challenging for the title, the challenging for the European places, and indeed the relegation spots towards the bottom of the table as well. And so I asked Richard Masters about the fact that when the Premier League is so competitive and that what makes it so different from perhaps other leagues in Europe, is it just a niggling concern that Manchester City have been proved to be so dominant? 5 wins in the last 6 seasons, as you say, but not a bit of it. Here's what the Premier League chief executive had to say in response.
Well, I think if you ask Pep Guardiola, he'd say it hasn't been easy. I mean, the record speaks for itself. They have won 5 of the last 6. But, you know, regimes come and go. They rise, empires rise and fall. We've seen that in the Premier League already in its 32-year history. And City, I guess, will be the same ultimately. Someone will take over eventually. Whether that's next season or the season after that or when that happens, I'm not sure. The main thing, as I said, is that we have competition right at the top of the division. I think the Premier League always has a title race, and we want that. We're going to have competition for European spots, and the relegation battle is going to be exciting as ever, I'm sure.
One of the other key issues, of course, for the start of this season is all of the changes we've seen in terms of rules and the interpretation of those rules. And something that's been discussed an awful lot, and we've done it on Sky Sports News as well, is about the massively increased amounts of additional time that we're expecting in the Premier League to try and cut down on time wasting, but also to get the ball in play. I mean, 55 minutes was the average time that the ball was in play in the Premier League last season, even though each match lasted about 98 minutes on average. And Raphael Varane and Kevin De Bruyne have both been critical, saying that could lead to more injuries if players are playing such extended periods at the end of the game. So that was a question, again, I put to Richard Masters.
What FIFA are trying to address is playing time, ultimately, via time wasted. The Premier League is about 98.5 minutes on average last season, and 55 minutes of playing time. They want to see that go up, and we're doing two things. One is referees are going to more literally calculate the amount of time that has been wasted during a game, which will probably mean more added time. But they're also going to crack down on the causes of time wasting. So we'll see more players booked for kicking the ball away, standing in front of free kicks, which our supporters tell us they want to see. So over time you should see these things even themselves out. If a player wants to take a minute to take a throw-in when they're 1-0 up with 10 minutes to go, they're likely to get yellow carded and that minute to be added on. So they're hearing in stereo, don't do it. That's very different to managing a game when you're 1-0 up. That is a skill, but time wasting is not a skill, and that's what we want to crack down on.